Welcome. Welcome. Give folks a moment to arrive. Welcome. Welcome to the final session of the Vital Village Networks of Opportunity for Child Wellbeing 2024 webinar series. The Imperative of Now, Community Power and Healing-Centered Advocacy. During this series, we've been spending time hearing from leaders across the country who are using healing-centered approaches to building community power and advocacy strategies grounded in dignity for children and families. Today, we will be joined by one of the Vital Village Network's Community Food Systems Fellows to talk about how they are building community power through education and food systems. As we begin our time together, we'd like to acknowledge that we're continuing to strengthen our language justice practices. And this webinar series will be available in Spanish with interpretation services provided through our partners at the Community Language Cooperative based in Colorado. At this time, I'd like to welcome Jasmine to provide us with a brief orientation.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Again, my name is Jasmine from the CLC. I am a language justice practitioner. And so what this means is that I help to provide simultaneous interpretation for meetings such as this one to create spaces where folks can participate in the language of their heart or the language that they feel the most comfortable in. And so as Rhonda mentioned, we'll be activating this function. As soon as we do that, you will see a globe pop up at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation. You can select your preferred language there. I ask that everyone who is not fully bilingual in English and Spanish, please do select your preferred language. So even if you speak English, make sure you select English if that is the only language that you speak. As a reminder to the speakers, please take your time with your words. Try to speak at a conversational pace. We try to keep up with what you're saying as much as possible, but Spanish is longer. So I ask that y'all just try to keep awareness of that. I'm going to repeat this briefly in Spanish and we'll be ready to get started. Buenos días, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Yasmín. De nuevo, estoy muy feliz de estar aquí con ustedes de parte de la CLC. Lo que yo hago es practicar justicia del lenguaje. Como parte de este esfuerzo es poder proporcionar interpretación simultánea para eventos tal como este, donde todos puedan participar en el idioma de su corazón o el idioma en el que se sienten más cómodos. Para hacer esto, vamos a activar esta función de interpretación en cuanto terminemos de dar instrucciones y en ese momento van a poder ver un globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Ahí va a decir interpretación. Si nos acompañan desde un dispositivo móvil, un celular, algún otro aparato, puede hacer clic en el menú con los tres puntitos que dice More o que dice Más. Igual es lo mismo, si no son bilingües en inglés y en español, por favor, elijan su idioma preferido. Les pido que tengan en mente su velocidad. El español es mucho más largo que el inglés, así que toma mucho más tiempo decir las mismas cosas. Así que un recordatorio para los oradores que por favor hablen a un paso de conversación y por favor tengan esto en mente. Cualquier cosa que se les ofrezca, mándenme mensaje por el chat y ahí con mucho gusto les puedo apoyar. Ya vamos a comenzar. Les recuerdo que por favor elijan ese idioma preferido. All right, y'all. So anything that you need from me throughout this meeting, send me a message via the chat and I will be happy to help that way or respond that way. Other than that, we are ready to get started. Thank you so much.
All right. This time, please, I think we are turning on interpretation right now. So at this time, take a moment to select the globe icon and select, locate it on the bottom of your Zoom window and follow the instructions on your screen and select the language that best suits you. I'm going to do that right now. Maybe. So please bear with me for just a moment while I do that. I'm going to pause my screen share in just a moment so I can select the right language. Thank you for that. Now we are back in business. We can keep moving along. Thank you all again. All right, let's go. So today's webinar will be recorded and posted on the Now forum within a few days. So know that we will be recording today's webinar. Also, we encourage you to engage with us by sharing what resonates with you in the chat box and submitting questions through the Q&A icon. And our guest, Taylor, will have the opportunity to respond to questions a little bit later in the hour. So while we will be together for a brief time, it's going to be packed with stories and lessons from the field for you to take back to your own practices. So we'll share a brief overview and welcome of Vital Village Networks, and now followed by some brief remarks from our featured speaker. And then later you'll be able to pose questions before we wrap up with a few announcements and about some upcoming opportunities, and then we'll wrap up with a closing. So whether you are joining us for the first time or have been with us for a while, I'd like to offer just a brief overview of Vital Village Networks. We are a collective of change makers who are committed to pioneering sustainable approaches to transforming child, family, and community well-being. We are rooted in Boston with a broad web of peers and partners across the country, all connected through the networks of opportunity for child well-being, better known as NOW. We are bonded through our guiding principles centered on practices of shared spaces for belonging, learning, engaging, and transforming our communities together. To learn more about our work and share your own stories, we invite you to visit the Now Innovation Forum, where you'll find resources and access to a variety of tools and stories of leaders working collaboratively to shift what it means for our children, our families, and our communities to thrive. So now that you've been oriented to Vital Village Networks, and now I'd like to highlight just a few key questions we hope to explore through this webinar series. What does it look like to harness and activate and build community power? What can we learn from resident and community-led advocacy movements? We're talking voter education, birth equity, food systems, and early childhood education. And those strategies towards self-advocacy, collective action, and legislative change. Regardless of whether we're in an election year or not, these questions are imperative to creating a world and a future where our children, our families, and our communities can thrive. So, without further ado, I am so excited to welcome Tailor Coble of FRESHFARM. So I am going to stop my screen share. I am going to invite Tailor to join us on screen and turn it over to you. Tailor, so happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. I'm really excited to be here today to talk more about the work that my organization is doing in DC, and to open up the floor to questions. So I'm going to share my screen. And we'll get this going. So as Rhonda mentioned, my name is Tailor Coble, and I work for a DC-based nonprofit called FRESHFARM. FRESHFARM is a DC-based nonprofit that builds a more equitable, vibrant, sustainable, and resilient food system in the Mid-Atlantic region by producing innovative solutions to critical problems. In partnership with local communities, organizations, we create food access opportunities, economic development, and thriving communities through hands-on education, farmers markets, and food distribution programs. So today I'm going to be talking specifically about our community engagement work. and then community education work that I support and also lead. So FreshFarm's approach to engaging community to increase food access really focuses on these 4 pillars. The first one is honoring lived experiences of our community members by centering their voices. The second is working collaboratively and strategically to engage all of our partners in holistic solutions whenever possible. We amplify and uplift community concerns through community-based coalitions. And then we also support folks through a range of hands-on education through training and technical assistance. And so when I was thinking about how to frame this work, really what we've learned about how to engage community really came out of our coalition building work. And so really learning how to intentionally communicate and facilitate with community. Sorry, I hope that you can't hear my baby downstairs. But really trying to work with community members to empower them as much as possible. And so going back to this first pillar of our community engagement work, acknowledging community members, caregivers, parents, and individuals providing direct services as experts. And so we met with our coalition monthly, and we really just started by creating a safe and welcoming space for those who would be most impacted by policies and programs to provide feedback in the beginning stages instead of at the end on government policies and initiatives that would really be impactful to them. And so our coalition really worked to empower, equip, and educate residents with lived experiences with food insecurity, to influence and inform food access programs and initiatives. And so our coalition, we met, we got into nitty-gritty details, and then without having to name any names, we really boosted all of those concerns to government agencies through our multi-sector coalition. And so that's really kind of where that work started. And so after that one piece of our work ended where we were doing coalition building really to inform policies for DC state initiatives, we also took that feedback to inform FreshFarm's own food access programs, because it doesn't really make sense to convene community members and hear about their concerns and the programs and projects they want to see happen without actually trying to do something about it. And so that kind of fed into the work that we're doing right now. And so in this day and age, we know we have to be really innovative about how we're engaging and connecting with our communities, especially when it comes to food. And so one thing we heard from our coalition was that if you're giving people food, you also need to be pairing it with food education. And so these are kind of just like 3 examples of where we've come at that from. So the first one is our Produce 101 guide. And this was really in response to people saying, I've seen this, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what to do with it. And so it's a really quick print and online resource where literally just shows you a different fruit or vegetable, the different ways you can see it, the simplest ways to prepare it, and then some links to some recipes. And so that's just one idea. And then the other one is our organization has a market share. It's like a CSA. And on our bags, on our reusable tote bags, is a QR code scan. And so the QR code scan takes you to a blog post that tells you what's in your bag that week, how you can prepare it. Here's some simple recipes, how you can store it if you have little ones, some tips and some tricks on how to engage them in the kitchen. And then this last piece was really just engaging community members in whatever ways they really needed to be engaged in through technical assistance. And so on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we had opportunities for providers and families to engage both online and in person. So our community food educators program, a lot of the work that our organization has done is like very flowy. And so this idea of pairing food education and food access is kind of how we had our community food educators be born. And so the community food educators program was initially thought to be a program where parents enrolled in our market share program could pick up their market share CSA at their child care center when they were picking up their child to make it more convenient. But then on top of that, a parent educator, a community food educator, would also be there to really kind of just be a cheerleader of seasonal fruits and vegetables and also be a parent peer educator. And so our community food educators received 6 weeks of workforce development training from our staff, where we covered nutrition, food education, health equity, leadership in your community, culinary skills, lots of things that you would need to really be able to confidently come into a community and say, hey, this is what I've seen, this is my experience, and this is how we're going to do this together. And so our organization embedded food educators with lived experiences at schools and in childcare communities to really start to build and create positive relationships with fresh and nourishing foods. And so, as I mentioned with our technical assistant, one of the programs that we came up with were these chop it up sessions. And this was at the height of COVID. And so families would pick up their market share bag and then they would join their community food educator virtually via Zoom, and we would prepare a meal from start to finish. And it was great. And so that was like one way that we were engaging our community, but also showing up with tastings, with a featured seasonal item, also supporting their classroom sessions, their gardening sessions. And really, as an organization, we recognize that childcare providers don't always have the capacity to follow through with some of the programs that they really want their children and their communities to be exposed to. And so really kind of taking that burden away by employing the educators, training them, supporting them, and really just letting them go out and do their thing. And so with our market share program, our CSA, we realized that farmers markets historically sometimes can be exclusive seeming places where if you look a certain way or you make a certain amount of money or you're paying with a certain kind of card, you may not feel like the market is for you. And so we really wanted to dispel this and make the markets more of a welcoming environment for everyone. I'll drop the link to FreshFarm's website in this, but we also run 30 to 40 farmers markets in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And so this is super important for us to make sure that the environments that we're putting out in our retail communities are really for everyone. And so we started this food navigator training in partnership with DC Health. And we trained market operators and other nonprofit caseworkers to really have the language to be able to first understand where all shoppers are coming from, and also have the language to be able to explain how the benefits work and know just the whole array of feelings that people are bringing to the market with them, especially when they're shopping with WIC or SNAP or Farmers Market Nutrition Program checks or whatever have you. If you're pulling out something that's not traditional means of payment, we want everyone around you to know how to react, how to respond, and how to make you feel like it's not a big deal, because it's not. And so our food navigator training is something that everyone in our organization takes, and we also partner with a lot of external organizations to do this as well, because it's really important to destigmatize the use of nutrition benefits at market. And then these are my last two slides of just my own kind of condensing of what are the ways that you can build and sustain community power. And so here are my tips for strategies. Here are my strategies for authentically working in communities. So the first one, which seems like a no-brainer, but still needs to be said, is actively listen and leave your biases at the door. It's very easy to think that you have all of the answers. You don't, and it's okay to be humble and come into community with that upfront. I didn't want to lead with this one, but this one is very important. Be as transparent and communicative as possible with funders about timelines and expectations. When doing community building work, it is very difficult to build rapport and build trust when you have all of these things figured out. And so it's really important to, whenever possible, let your funders know what to expect. It's going to take us 2 months before we're going to have results. And then even still, what are those results going to look like? Always make your intentions known to the communities you're working with. If you really need some results really fast, you can be honest about that with your community, and you can say, hey, you guys, we are working on a timeline and XYZ, but anytime some parts are moving, it's so much easier to just say what's happening, because yeah, how are we going to be in community when there's like all of these side things happening? Yeah, we're in this together. Keep your goals and programming flexible to allow for community input and discourse every step of the way. Sometimes you are, working through a grant or working through a funding source, where they want to know in month 2 what's going to be happening. And it's very hard to say what the community is going to want until you start working with the community. And so just, yeah, build that in whenever you can. Also, accept your role as facilitators. Communities, 9 times out of 10, already know what they need to thrive and succeed and be healthy. And they literally just need you as that person who's like facilitating resources or power or whatever. And so accept your role, let community do what they need to do. Also, I love this photo because when I was a community food systems fellow, I was able to apply for a little mini grant, and we had a cook camp with our childcare providers where they all came together and they talked about their own struggles with food and they made food together. And this is an awesome rock star, Miss Lily, showing Miss Karen how to cut an onion. Just providing opportunities for, this is actually on my next slide, so I'll just go there. Creating opportunities for community members to become leaders. Anytime you can, yes, building opportunities for peer-to-peer support, peer-to-peer resource building, peer-to-peer facilitation opportunities. Also providing tangible skills and resources that allow communities to better advocate for themselves, whether that be supporting them with like grant writing or literal skills of how do you advocate for yourself in your own organization or in your community. Collaboratively develop gradual release plans for the work to continue without you. In an ideal world, all of the projects we start would be funded indefinitely. That is not the world we live in right now, and that's okay. But just like creating space for that, and a part of, in my opinion, building power is figuring out how the work will continue without you. And so sometimes that's like, I don't know, showing people how to get money without you. Sometimes that's showing someone how to develop a program or a curriculum, whatever that may be, creating this plan before the time comes, making yourself available to support their work and interest in ways that make sense, and not being afraid to be a squeaky wheel for your community, because this work doesn't get done if we don't do it. And so I'll leave there, and would love to hear if there are any questions.
Wow. Thank you so much, Taylor. I'm gonna invite you to stay on camera. You said something towards the end, and all I heard was Kendrick Lamar in my head saying, sit down and be humble. Like, that's what I heard in my head. Participants, I know you're there, so I just want to invite you to feel free to use the Q&A box. I'm going to share my screen very briefly just to show you the icon where you can drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. So we'll take as many questions as we can. In the meantime, while you're coming up with your questions, I have a few questions for Taylor, so I'm going to start with those, but feel free to begin to drop your questions in the Q&A box using that icon on your own Zoom window. So Taylor, one of the questions that came to mind for me, you talked quite a bit about community power and building community power, and I'm curious about what does building community power mean to you in your work, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I love that. So for me in my work, community power and building community power looks like you don't need my services anymore.
Mm.
Um, I'm finding that so often when especially when it comes to food education and nutrition education, you go into a community and people are just like, I can't do this work. And it's like, I know this work seems overwhelming. It's hard to know where to start sometimes. And so when I think about building community power, it's really the power to be able to continue to do this work, however it looks to you, whatever your vision is, without me. I want to be there as your cheerleader and your supporter, but don't want to be there as like the person who's coordinating everything, because that's an effort that we want people to be able to lead on their own.
Mm. And is that you and how's that unique specifically for food systems? And I ask this question as someone who is a kitchen and a food sys- who might be a little kitchen averse. I say that lightly. But yeah, in food systems, what does that mean too?
The thought that initially came to my mind is you can teach a person to fish,
Mm.
but I never can remember like the end of like the proverbs and stuff. But
Oh,
um, I think when it really comes to health, especially in this day and age, it can be really easy to want to outsource stuff where you're just like, oh, somebody meal prep for me, or I just want to get this really convenient thing. And I think that we really have to like, oh yes, thank you. Sometimes I'm struggling for the words. Caitlin put it in the chat, capacity building. That is really what it is, especially when it comes to taking control of our health and our lifestyle. Yeah, we want to show people how easy it is to, I'm sorry, my my house is just like buzzing and alive right now. But yes, in terms of food systems work, food insecurity is this huge thing to tackle. And so we all have to kind of take back whatever power we can, and do what we can with that.
thank you. Thank you for that. Um, I think another thing that's coming up for me is that your work um, is at the intersection of food systems and early childhood education. Why is that intersection particularly important?
Love that question and also love that intersection. So I'm going to answer it, but also just take a step back. When I first got into food systems work, I was doing this, but specifically with elementary schoolers. And so we were doing our FoodPrints program, which is our hands-on gardening and food education program. But it was really targeting the kids and hoping that the kids would go home and tell their parents how awesome kale was, and then pick it up at the grocery store, and then they'd bring the recipe home from their backpack and they'd make it. Working with the childcare community, you're like right at the source where you're engaging with parents at a time in their lives and in their children's lives where they're so laser focused on what to do. And then on top of that, you're getting kids and their palates trained before they've got all these other outside influences in. And so I love being at this intersection because it's really where everyone has the most power, both caregivers, family members, and little babies. And so I love being able to get everyone before there's like, a bunch of like tainted ideas or yeah, feelings.
Yeah. Um, I love that. I think you started to hit on some of the successes. What have been some of the challenges of working at sort of this multi-sector intersection?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest challenges is that we are all set in our own ways,
Mhm.
whatever those ways may be, and it's really hard to pull them out of it. Sometimes as parents, we are like, "Oh, my baby doesn't like that," and you're like, "Well, you only gave it to your baby like twice." And studies show that it takes like 6 to 10 times of trying something before you really have like the knowledge to make a decision on it. And so one thing that's been really challenging is just convincing parents to keep trying. And I know that that is honestly coming from a place of privilege. If you're asking a parent to continue to try to feed their baby something that they're not liking, and it's like a waste of money and it's a waste of time. And so that has been really hard of just like explaining how getting over some humps are just like worth it in the long run. I would say that's probably the biggest challenge is just like changing ideas. Changing minds.
Awesome. We had a couple questions coming in. This first question says, for someone interested in this work coming from nursing, where do you recommend getting your foot in the door?
That is such an interesting question. Um, I don't know. My first thought of that question is I wonder what your background is in terms of like where you're coming from nursing. Like, is it dietetics? Is it nutrition? Is it something food related? Because health and food are just like this. And so I feel like if you wanted to do community engagement work, or like nutrition education work, I feel like your experience in the health sector is just, I don't know, very important. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Yeah, that's okay. And I wonder if it's just about getting out there and going to some of those things that you highlighted, right? Going to some of those events, being there, volunteering, showing up, just hanging out, putting your face out there too.
Yeah.
No, they didn't ask me, they were asking you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Right. All right, we got another one. This one says, do you find non-school aged children and those that care for them face unique circumstances when it comes to addressing and experiencing food insecurity as compared to school aged children?
Hmm,
How do those materialize in your work?
that is such an interesting question. Um, I haven't thought about this question, but I definitely have seen like noticeable differences. Um, Sorry, just reading your question again. So I feel like the resources that we have for non-school age children and school age children are really different. And I think that that is sometimes where I see the biggest difference between food insecurity. Um, yeah, that's such an interesting question. I'm going to think on that some more.
Okay, we can come back to it. All right. Our next question says, what role do you think educators have, especially going into the next 4 years, in building community power in schools?
This feels like a really loaded question, because educators already have so many roles to play that it almost feels inappropriate to to add anything else onto their plates, especially considering what the next 4 years could potentially look like. And I would say that it's really important for educators to continue to center what we've already been doing and what has already been done in terms of building community power. And when I say that, I mean, there's so much power in numbers, and there's so much that we can impact in our own like small communities that will make a difference on your day-to-day life versus, all of the fodder that's happening in the background. And so I would say educators have to continue to be honest and resilient. And that's kind of all I would ask for educators moving forward right now.
That actually kind of I think lends itself to a question that was coming up for me too around what strategies have been helpful to center community voices in your work and that of sort of students and families and of educators. Like, how are we making sure that we're centering them too and not coming and saying like this is what you need to be doing, but really
Right.
how.
And that's really just like continuously creating opportunities for feedback and honest communication and rapport. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Right. We have another question, folks. Feel free to keep sharing your questions. We do have time for a bit more. Um, this question says, wow is right. I have so many questions. They said, I've been working to build a local community food system here in South Alabama. Started a farmer's market, school gardens, now working a nonprofit. And I think this one's just a little bit more of a comment and praise, but um, much of what you were doing or things that they've been brainstorming about, but just thinking and they're, I think, just sharing that much of what you're doing is and sharing is what they've been learning about. So just really appreciating and singing your praises.
Yeah, even though it's not a question, I would definitely love to comment on it. I think that the amazing thing about Fresh Farm as an organization is that we've got our hands in kind of like all of the right pots when it comes to food systems work, where we're doing so actually now this will be a good time for me to talk more about Fresh Farm's work in general. So in addition to the food education and the community engagement and education work we're doing, we also have the food distribution programs. And so we run our farmers markets. We've got 35 plus producer only markets. And then in addition to that, we have our internal pop-up food hub, which is really taking advantage of the fact that farmers are already harvesting their crops and packing their trucks ready to go to market. And so we put in these large wholesale orders, ask them to bring them to the market. We pop up tents, we build the infrastructure at the market. And then we sometimes we aggregate those orders and we pack it into bags and send it out to community partners. And then other times we just take the whole wholesale order and deliver it to someone else with no markup. And so it's kind of nice to be able to do all of the things in-house because everything's going into our network. So when we're ordering food from the farmers for our food education program, we're putting that money back into the farmers programs, into the farmers pockets, but also introducing our community to new things. And so, yes, I love that you guys are trying to do it all.
Yeah, yeah. This question, we've had a couple more questions come in. This one says, they may have missed it, but does Fresh Farm have a community refrigerator?
We do not. Community refrigerator, like, sorry, lots of different ideas of community refrigerators. The ones that are just like in the community with produce that you access, or like a storage facility place. So we don't have a community refrigerator, but we do have like a processing facility.
I think that's what they were asking. Yeah, got it. And then this next question says, can you speak more to the food educators and childcare? Were those parents that were leading, and what types of supports or training were provided?
Yeah, so those were parents that were leading. And so we provided a really similar training that we do for our food and gardening educators, our FoodPrints teachers, where it's really talking about the importance of nutrition, how we talk about nutrition, how we talk about health equity, social impacts and deterrence of health, kind of just like helping them understand the landscape of the food system that we're working within. So that was the training that they got. And then types of support was just ongoing workforce development training. So we recognized that everybody was coming in with a completely different skill set. And so some people we had to work on drafting emails to send to your community. Some people it was how to lesson plan, how to shop, how to manage your time. So yeah, that was like very, very different based on the different food educators that we were working with. But yeah, we ended up employing a total of 6 community food educators from the community. And then now 3 of them are FoodPrints assistant teachers in the communities that they live in. One of them actually works at her son's school doing food and gardening education. And so it's really great to kind of like bring people through the pipeline, see where they wanted to go, and then kind of put them into place.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I have one final question for you. Um, so what's on the horizon for you and the Food Prints program? What what's
Yeah,
what's
great
on the
question.
horizon?
So we actually have just launched our Food Prints for Early Learners program in the childcare space with 2 amazing partners here in DC, Educare DC, and it's been amazing. We are connecting with the staff through these Wellness Wednesdays. We're connecting with families through these in-person Chop It Ups, and then we're also working with kids in the classroom and in the garden. And so that's what we're focused on right now, really working on this next generation of eaters and farmers.
Oh, Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this. Um, Taylor, thank you so much for just taking time out of your schedule to just share your story and your wisdom and your leadership with us, with me, with our network. We're just so grateful for the work that you're doing on behalf of children and families and caregivers. And I think your work is really essential to the healing of our community, and from the root, from the beginning, with how we nourish ourselves. And so just thank you for being a member and a leader within our village. Um, so yeah, it's just so appreciative of you today.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. It was great to speak with you all, and I hope that this has been helpful.
Yeah, it has, absolutely. To our participants, hang on before you leave. We have a few announcements about just a few things to share and what's coming up before you head out. Um, Following this session, you'll receive a reflective action guide. It's designed for your own personal use. And part of that is just to help you think about and consider what you're hearing and what actions you might take to build community power, and to deepen healing centered advocacy work in your own space, in your own work. And it will be available in both Spanish um, and in English. Also, I invite you to take a listen to the third season of our podcast, In the Arena with Now. There are new episodes airing this fall and winter. And I also invite you, of course, to check out our first two seasons and catch up on our current season. You can find those on the Now Innovation Forum or anywhere you get your podcasts. Um, Also, to learn more about our approach to building community power and healing centered advocacy, you can visit the Now Innovation Forum to check out the Now Playbook, a sort of how-to guide to transformative community capacity to advance equity. This guide features tools as well as best practices from coalitions across the country on how to build new futures together. You can also find a dignity centered guide to reflecting on cooperative funding structures on the forum. This is a guide for exploring funding partnerships grounded in equity and power sharing. Um, Finally, just thank you for joining us today. We look forward to connecting with you through the forum, social media, and seeing you in 2025. Have a safe and restful holiday season. We have work to do in 2025, so take care of yourselves, of your families, of your communities, and each other. So thank you all. See you later.